What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I want to talk about sensitivity in Advanced Warfare. I'll share the sensitivity settings that I use and also some tips on how to find the right sensitivity for you. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so I want to start this off by saying something that's very important when it comes to sensitivities. Use the sensitivity that works for you. Don't use the sensitivity that a YouTuber uses just because that YouTuber uses that sensitivity, or maybe an MLG Pro. Don't just try to emulate what they're doing if it's not working out for you. Sure, your sensitivity might be exactly the same as my sensitivity, and it might work out great for both of us, but that's not necessarily always going to be the case. So having said all that, I'll tell you guys the sensitivity that I use. When I'm playing relatively defensively and playing more at longer ranges, which is actually kind of my preferred playstyle in Advanced Warfare, I like using the AK-12 and just kind of sitting back, picking people off at a distance, and then challenging the odd person up close. But I always try to keep my gunfights in Advanced Warfare at a little bit of a distance. So the sensitivity that I tend to use is either 3 or 4. I kind of go back and forth, and this is something I also recommend. Even if 4 is your normal sensitivity, if you find it's just a little too high at this particular moment, don't be afraid to just bump that down to a 3. Maybe you get used to the 3 again and you can bump it back up to the 4. A lot of people, they get stuck on one sensitivity and it just stops working for them. Try something new if it's not working out for you. So that's what I use. I use a 3 or a 4 sensitivity. This is actually a little bit lower than the sensitivities that I used to use in previous Call of Duty games. And I think a big reason for this is the verticality. In Advanced Warfare, I feel like I need to have a great amount of control over my aim when somebody's jumping up into the air. I don't want to be overcompensating, aiming past him, aiming way above him or below him. I want to be on target. I want to be able to track my targets in mid-air. If your sensitivity is too low in this case, you won't be able to actually stay on target. Your aim won't be able to keep up with your target as he's moving through the air. If it's too high though, you'll aim way past your target and you'll be all over the place. A lot of times I find if I'm using a sensitivity that's too high, or if I'm watching somebody's gameplay where their sensitivity is too high, they'll basically like draw a circle around their enemy with their fire because they can't actually get snapped right on the target. They're constantly overcompensating and they're aiming past their target. So this is where I found there was a nice balance for the AK-12 and for my personal playstyle with a 3 or 4 sensitivity. Now one thing that I find is when I switch to an SMG class and maybe I play like hardpoint or a game mode where I'm right up in the enemy's face all the time, I typically bump up my sensitivity by 1 or 2 points. I don't want to go too extreme with it because that gets just way out of my comfort zone. But I do want that ability to turn around on people. If someone sneaks up behind me, I can spin around and I can have a chance at challenging that gunfight with a 6 sensitivity or a 5 sensitivity compared to my regular 3 to 4 sensitivity. Now, like I said, I don't take this to the extreme. Some people still do play on like a 20 sensitivity, and to me, that's completely insane, but if it's working for you, who am I to tell you that's wrong? If it's working and you're honest with yourself, you're actually hitting your target very consistently, and you're able to stay on target in the average gunfight that you put yourself in with the playstyle that you're using, then that's great. I wouldn't really recommend going up to a 20 sensitivity, but if you can handle it, good for you. So let's have a look at sensitivities in general and kind of my philosophy behind picking a sensitivity that works for you. On one end, on the low end, we have sensitivity that's very low. It allows you a lot of fine control, especially at longer ranges where your target's basically just a speck on your screen. You have a lot of fine control to be able to track your target, and you don't have that fine control when you get to the higher end of the sensitivities. When you are on that higher end of the sensitivities, you're able to turn around really quickly. You're able to spin in 360 degrees and challenge enemies from any angle you want very, very quickly. And if you get good with this sensitivity, you can snap between targets almost instantly. Now the downside to this, like I said just now, is you lose that fine control at any sort of range. So when you try to challenge somebody at long range and they move to the side a little bit, most of the time you're going to overcompensate your aim and you're going to aim way past where he was moving to. So there's always going to be a trade-off when you're looking at sensitivity ranges. I don't usually recommend going with the absolute lowest sensitivity because then you don't have that ability to turn around if something unexpected happens, like an enemy sneaks up behind you, or even just a little bit to the left or right of where you're aiming. You might not be able to snap onto that target fast enough. On the other end, I don't usually recommend going up to a 20 sensitivity because you lose a lot of that fine control with your aim. So think about your playstyle and think about the average gunfight you find yourself in. If you're the type of guy that's challenging people across the map, you're probably going to want to go with a slightly lower sensitivity. On the other end of that, if you're a guy that rushes around like crazy, you probably want to go a little bit more towards the higher side, although I wouldn't recommend really going above 10 for most guns unless you're sniping. For the average full auto weapon, the 10 sensitivity, you can still spin very, very quickly. You can turn around very fast, but you don't completely sacrifice that control, that fine control, when you get to that medium to long range gunfight. So now that you have this sort of general guideline as to whether or not you should be on a lower end or a higher end of the sensitivity, now it's time to actually play with the sensitivities and get used to the sensitivity. Keep in mind, when you initially change that sensitivity, you aren't just going to suddenly get used to it. It usually takes at least a couple games to get used to a new sensitivity, and I also wouldn't recommend changing your sensitivity by more than 1 to maximum 2 points at a time. So if you're at a 2 sensitivity right now and you'd like to maybe work it up a little bit higher, don't jump straight up to a 6 or a 7 or something like that. Instead, start by going to a 3 or a 4, playing with that for a little while. Once you get used to that, then maybe bump it up to that 5 or that 6. But don't just make a big jump from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other. It'll be so uncomfortable for you, you won't be able to control your aim effectively, and you're not doing yourself any good by doing this. So as you're making these adjustments, how do you know when you've found the right sensitivity for you? Once you start getting used to a sensitivity a little bit and you play a few games and you start to get comfortable, have a look at your gunfights that you're getting in. If you can record, then that's great. Like if you can use the Xbox record that or the PS4 share or whatever to record your gameplay, this is the best way because a lot of the times you don't really notice when you're actually in a gunfight, but then you go and watch it afterwards and you notice some big issues. If you have this available to you, then do it. If not, then just try to pay attention to your gunfights. If you are constantly aiming just a little bit too far past your enemy, or you're drawing a circle around your enemy like I said earlier, and you're kind of panicking and you're not locking on target fast enough, you're kind of all over the place, this usually means your sensitivity is just a little bit too high, and it might be time to bump it down just 1 or 2 points. On the other end of that, if you find that you just constantly can't quite react in time, or you see an enemy but you just can't get on target in time because your sensitivity is too low, it might be time to try bumping it up just 1 or 2 points. Play around with this until you find that right level. And keep in mind, I don't have one right sensitivity for me like I said before. I play with a 3 to 4. And if I have an SMG, I might bump it all the way up to a 5 or even a 6. So it's not going to be one number that you're stuck with all the time. Some people do stick with one number, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one number. So play around with it and constantly make adjustments to that sensitivity based on how you're playing and how your aim is behaving. So a sensitivity video wouldn't be complete if I didn't mention Kontrol Freeks. Now I will say I am affiliated with Kontrol Freeks, but this is not a paid video. I was not asked to mention them in this video. Nothing like that. I've been using their products for like 5 years now, even though I've only been affiliated with them for like 6 months. So I really do use their products and I do believe in their products. So I thought I'd mention them at the end of the video here and also share with you guys my code for 10% off Kontrol Freeks. Basically, if you don't know what Kontrol Freeks are, I'll just explain what they are really quickly. It's just a thumbstick attachment, so it's a thumbstick extension. It just clips onto your existing thumbstick on your controller, doesn't damage anything, it's not permanent, you can always just take it off whenever, and it increases your range of motion with that thumbstick. So without a Kontrol Freek, you have about a 1/4 inch of movement left or right, or up or down, I guess in 360 degrees with your thumbstick. If you pop a Kontrol Freek on there, especially one that's a little bit taller, you can pretty much double that range of motion. What this means for your aim is you're able to make fine adjustments way easier. This is why keyboard and mouse is typically a whole lot more accurate than a controller. A mouse has a range of motion of, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches, maybe a little bit more or less depending on your mouse pad and your entire setup. But that's why they don't need aim assist on PC, and that's why they're able to stay so accurate. It's because they have that increased range of motion on their mouse. This is essentially what Kontrol Freeks are doing, just not to the same extent that a mouse would. Now, I'm not saying that these Kontrol Freeks are going to make you a better player or anything like that. They do just help you get a little bit more control over your aim. And I use them all the time. I literally can't play without them. I suck without Kontrol Freeks, I find, just because I'm so used to them. So if you do decide to pick up some Kontrol Freeks, they're only about 10 to 15 bucks for 2 of them, and normally you only use one. I only use one Kontrol Freek on the stick that actually controls the aim. I don't find a need for a Kontrol Freek or increased range of motion on the analog stick that just controls your movement, because you don't really need to make really fine movements with your character. It's just with your aim. But if you want to pick some up, then I will leave my code in the description below, as well as on the screen here. My code is exclusive. This will give you 10% off Kontrol Freeks, and I will make a small commission off of that sale. So you save a little bit of money, I make a little bit of money, and Kontrol Freeks gets a sale. So it's kind of a win-win-win. If you're not sure about which Kontrol Freeks to use, I'm using the Sentinel Kontrol Freeks. I find these are great because I like a concave shape to my Kontrol Freek, or to my thumbstick, rather than a convex shape, but you can go either way with that. It's really just personal preference. Plus, the Sentinels are a little bit on the higher side, and I have kind of bigger hands, so I can handle that very well. If you have smaller hands, I highly recommend going with one of the CQC models or one of the shorter models. It will say on the website all the different sizes and whether or not they're a longer stick or a shorter one. But basically, just go off of what your preference is. If you like a domed stick, go with a domed stick. If you like a longer stick, then go with the longer stick. It really just comes down to personal preference. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys learned something new about sensitivities, and I hope that this will help point you in the right direction to finding that perfect sensitivity for you. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.